transition to our next panel. And just so that kind of everyone's caught up to speed to where we're at, we're on our third panel, and we're going to do a deep dive of City of Antioch, kind of do an overview of some of how on our end we're specifically dealing and are impacted by some of the growing homelessness challenges in the city and the county, and more importantly, how encampments impact our city. And so, just so our panel understands, we've had two previous panels. We had an overview from the county and our CDBG housing consultant, as well as a kind of a regional / county look at how different agencies are being impacted by homelessness. So we heard from Tri-Delta Transit, we heard from
county court teams.
The county court teams. We also heard from
Contra Costa Fire.
Contra Costa Fire Department and Health Right 360.
Yeah, and the library.
And the library. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Getting back too much. So for those following on Facebook and those who have just come, the task force was tasked to looking at some of the challenges around encampments, and then we will be reporting back probably in August to the City Council to provide kind of a report out and some recommendations. So myself and Council Member Motts can easily do this in private during one-on-one conversations with our department heads and different agencies, but we decided to make this as transparent as possible so that the public can also have some input in some of the recommendations that we make. So we'll open it up to 5 to 7 minute testimony that we'll be receiving for presentation, however you want to do it. And then we will open it up to some question and answers. Joy will ask the first question, I will ask a follow-up question, and then we'll open it up to a member of the public, and we'll continue to rotate in that fashion until the time is up. Are we good? Thank you, gentlemen. So we'll start with our Public Works Director, John Blank, and he's joined by our Chief of Police, Tammany Brooks, and our Community Development Director, Forrest Ebbs, and our Animal Services Manager,
George Harding.
He's new, so I'll pass it to you. And I have a time, I'll let you know how much time you have left.
Thank you. My name is John Blank, and I'm Director of Public Works. It's the second largest department behind the police department. The Public Works Department primarily provides support services and responds to requests for public service. Much of the work that Public Works does is cleanup of creeks and removal of debris and trash, treating the debris from going to the waterways. We spend quite a bit of effort in that. What Public Works will do is, if there is a call for an encampment to be cleaned up, the complaint will go to code enforcement, and then Public Works will be called to provide staff to then go and provide dumpsters, equipment trucks, to place the garbage, staff that will go into the creeks to remove the debris, garbage and so forth, to bring it to our waterways. And as part of that, we spend quite a bit of time in the creeks, and unfortunately, most of the accidents that we have related to staff tripping or falling or hurting themselves is a part of cleaning out the creeks. So it is important that we do this work, and the encampments create a tremendous amount of debris and garbage that we enter around and remove. So it's very important that we do this, and we're going to continue to do the best job we can, and we'll continue to pledge to support code enforcement to provide the necessary staff. Besides the creeks, we do other cleanups around town, especially around Waldy Plaza. Prior to events, we prepare and clean the grounds, mow and power wash. And we do a lot of power washing because, unfortunately, homes sometimes you don't have adequate facilities. So recently, Public Works provided a temporary restroom with like a porta potty at Waldy Plaza parking lot, and try to minimize the cleanup with power washing walls and sidewalks and so forth. But we do provide those services prior to events, and picking up any garbage, keeping it, because when you have an event in Antioch, that event represents the city of Antioch. And when people come here, we want them to have a great time. We want to make Antioch a great place to be and have events, gather, and Public Works does the most it can to support the requests for these special events that occur quite often. They're fabulous, and we're there to support those. Other than that, there's miscellaneous cleanup. Code enforcement has boats, and when they don't have the ability to pick up debris or garbage or items that are left on the public right-of-way or even on other properties, they'll call code enforcement, and then code enforcement will dispatch to Public Works. Public Works will pick up those objects, take them to the Fulton Yard for disposal at a later time. And we have a lot of staff that will come around and pick up materials and dispose of them to keep our streets clean. One of my most highest goals is to keep Antioch clean, support community development with litter removal, and to get anything that's left behind our streets, that's garbage, waste, debris, picked up and disposed of so it doesn't go to our streets. So basically, Public Works is to provide public services, keeping our streets clean, and for providing sanitary conditions, and trying to keep our creeks clean. And it's just, we're very supportive. We're all about support services and public services at Public Works. And I think with that concludes my discussion of what the services we provide.
Okay, John.
Good afternoon.
I have a loud voice. I typically don't use the microphone.
Trying my best. Yeah. So my name is Tammany. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Antioch. And while we're here to talk about homelessness and encampments, while I talk about the police department, I think it's important to remember that our mission does not change whether we're dealing with someone who has a home or does not. We are an organization that provides professional and ethical public safety services to this community. We enforce laws, and we do our best to hold people who break the laws accountable for their actions and to keep our community safe, regardless of their housing status. So I think that's important to remember, because a lot of people sometimes look at us in law enforcement to try and, we're often told, solve the problem. And I need to remind people often that being homeless in and of itself is not a crime. And a lot of people don't want to hear that when we explain that to them. They expect us, as a law enforcement agency, we are one of the few, if not the last, public agency that still works 24/7 and makes house calls for free. And so people reach out to us expecting us to solve their problems. With that said, we often do encounter people who are experiencing homelessness. And I'll give you some stats from 2018. In that calendar year, we had 2,906 calls for service relating to dealing with people with homelessness. We wrote 220 reports and made 133 arrests. So far this calendar year of 2019, we've had 1,293 calls for service, resulting in 95 reports and 46 arrests. The arrests are for a behavior. They are not arrested for being homeless. They are arrested because they engaged in some sort of criminal activity. Oftentimes the criminal activity that we see are nuisance types crimes, trespassing, shoplifting, theft, vandalism, loitering, public intoxication, or being under the influence of drugs, littering, illegal dumping, disturbing the peace are just a few. But sometimes, like any segment of our population, these people can also engage in violent crimes. And oftentimes we see violent crimes being committed against other homeless people. And we have to address those issues and make an arrest when appropriate. Now, as I said, being homeless
is not a crime. So we actually have a two-man team that's dedicated to working with the homeless, working with our code enforcement. It's called a SET team, which is a community engagement team. And they are often liaisons between the people experiencing homelessness and resources that are available to them, which I think you've already heard earlier from the core team. There's a MET team, which is a mental health evaluation team, which goes out to help people who might be experiencing some mental health issues. And then we also, in Antioch, are fortunate enough to be a recipient. The county is the recipient, but we are the beneficiary of a $5.9 million grant entitled Lead Plus, which is a law enforcement assisted diversion program, which helps us identify people who are engaged in low-level criminal conduct on a repeat basis, and instead of filing those cases with the district attorney's office, working to see if we can, on the front end, provide resources that allow us to hopefully correct any issues or help them overcome some obstacles that they're facing, which possibly encourage them to engage in that criminal behavior. So, with that, I will say that we oftentimes are an intermediary between residents and business owners, who oftentimes are the ones who call regarding homeless individuals who are camped out in front of their businesses or to the rear of the businesses of their homes, and their presence has a negative impact on whether it's their property values, whether it's their property, if there's some vandalism taking place, or their business. And so we're oftentimes asked to move people who are trespassing. And again, this is not a solution to the problem. We're just basically moving them from one place to the other, offering services when we can. But from a law enforcement perspective, we don't have, as it stands right now, a long-term solution in dealing with this problem, because we're dealing with, again, behavior, which is the criminal acts that sometimes take place with people experiencing homelessness.
Well, thank you. My name is Forrest, Ebbs. I'm the Community Development Director, City of Antioch. I've been with the city for about 4 years. And one thing I've learned in Antioch is that you never want to follow Chief Brooks on a presentation. He's always so smooth, so good at it. It's hard to live up to that. Thank you. I'll be fine, so I'm feeling good. Community development, it's interesting to feel. People don't really quite know what our department does. We do a lot of different things. So the divisions in my department are, we have a planning division, so all the city planning work that goes out. All this big development, these new houses, all the new construction projects you see out there start with city planning. We have a citywide general plan, and we implement that. And they get the design review, they work with the planning commission. So we have the planning division. I also have the building inspection services division, our building department. That's where people go to get the building permits, to actually construct those. We have a very busy building department because they don't just look at the new houses going up, they look at kitchen remodels, water heater replacements, and every other small and large construction project in town. I also have the housing and CDBG function in my department. So Terry House was here earlier this morning. And CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant, plays a really important role. We were very fortunate to have Terry House in our organization. She brings with her an immense amount of experience and education. She knows every program, it's a whole different language, and she speaks it fluently, so she's a real asset to our community. Just this Tuesday for CDBG, we programmed $128,000 specifically to homeless efforts. Now, the city doesn't spend that directly in providing services because we're not a social services provider, but what we use that for is to support third-party service providers. So there are a number of nonprofits in our community who directly serve the homeless population. And we offer, they're essentially grants. We offer direct funding to these organizations to allow them to do their good work in our community. And CDBG, which is a pass-through of federal dollars, enables us to do that. But along with that, there's a lot of communication and reporting that goes with it. Terry also sits on a number of boards throughout the county. You hear a lot these days from the governor about funding for homelessness, and we hear about hundreds of millions of dollars and all these things. Well, usually that starts at the state level and can sort of county conduit and eventually makes it to cities. And having good representation at the table when those conversations are being had, and more importantly, those commitments are being made, is extremely important. Having someone like Terry available to know when those meetings are, who the people to talk to, what kind of programs. How do we get our share of those state dollars? If you sit by and wait for it to come to you, it will not happen. And so that's a real priority of ours, is to stay abreast, to stay current, and have the right people in place to do that is important. So through Community Development Block Grant, we stay apprised of that. A lot of those solutions, and when you hear about the state dollars, those are really looking at housing solutions and not so much the encampment issue, but really how do we transition people out of homelessness and into homes and into sort of rejoining society in that way. And it's an extremely complicated issue. There's not one solution at all. And again, that's an area that we're going to continue to develop. We're grateful that the state is supportive of this, grateful that there's renewed attention, and we'll be pursuing that through our CDBG and housing function. So community development also houses environmental services. So that manages our solid waste or trash contracts and all of our recycling programs, our climate action planning, all these other things we have. And finally, community development has the code enforcement division. So code enforcement traditionally has served to enforce the municipal code, primarily. And typically, we're complaint-driven. People call, they'll complain whether it's my neighbor has 3 junk cars in their front yard and I'm tired of looking at them, or my neighbor's building an addition on the back of his house without permits. Traditionally, it's been along those lines. As the homeless encampment issue has grown, the decision was made a few years ago that code enforcement would expand its role and would begin addressing some of the land-based impacts of homeless encampments. So what I mean by that is the code enforcement does not cite people. We do not have the authority to do that. So, but the city has an obligation, John mentioned this earlier, to maintain its property to certain standards. Take, for example, the city owns a lot of creeks. You see these waterways and creeks in through town. The city owns a lot of those. And we rely on those to convey stormwater from the rest of the city eventually out to the San Joaquin River. We have a permit from the federal government that allows us to discharge that. If that permit has conditions, you have to keep it clean. They don't want filthy water and trash flowing through that creek out into the river. Well, one of the challenges that we encounter is if everybody stayed out of the creek beds, it'd be pretty simple. But unfortunately, these creek beds also offer a great place to set up homes in here. They're usually outside. There's a degree of privacy. You usually don't have homes right on them, so they tend to attract a lot of encampments. So we're tasked with balancing how do you move an encampment that's on one hand violating all of our clean water requirements, on the other hand, there's not really another alternative. Code enforcement role in this is really pretty simple. We're there to try to clean up the mess. And that's really what they do. They provide notice, typically a 3-day notice at minimum, saying, listen, there's all this garbage and trash. Unfortunately, these encampments generate an enormous amount because there aren't facilities on site. They give notice, talk to what we're going to come back here in a few days, and we're going to be cleaning up all the garbage and trash. If people leave belongings behind that have value, code enforcement, we have storage lockers, we store those for, 60 days minimum, and people can come retrieve them there. Code enforcement has 2 people who are tasked with doing nothing except driving around picking up garbage and large objects. You see them in the trucks and the trailers, and those resources along with Public Works help clean up these encampments. So, to summarize everything here, code enforcement's role, this extended role, is really to maintain city property. At the same time, we address private property through the property owners. You're not allowed the city of Antioch to maintain property that's full of garbage, it's got broken windows. We've had cases where vacant commercial buildings vacant commercial buildings is taken over by a population and windows are broken and trash is left, and that's something that we work with the property owner. We do not secure people's property in that sense, but we tell the property owner we do not maintain this condition. So it's complicated. We do the best that we can. Code enforcement works very closely with the SET team. Every time we encounter a homeless population, we're bringing resources there. We offer information on where you can reach out for homeless services and social services. So that's our role. So with that, I'll pass it along. Thank you.
My name is George Harding. I'm the Animal Services Manager. We actually are part of the police department. Lucky for us, though, however, we have a very specific role in what we do. What we are doing is trying to provide for the health and welfare of the pets and the people within the community. Where we kind of are impacted from this is when there are pets left in one of the homeless encampments. Animal Services is asked to send an officer out and see if they can help with those pets. It typically is an interaction of where a pet has been left in an encampment without an owner there to take custody of the animal, at which point then we end up having to impound the animal at the animal shelter. Obviously, it's one of those things we don't really want to do because when you're removing an animal from a person, bring it to an animal shelter, there are a bunch of fees and things that come into play, and a lot of times those folks aren't able to really pay those fees. So we try to do everything we can to ensure that, one, we don't have to pick up the animal, and two, that we try to provide some resources to those folks that are out there that need those things. The other thing that we also do as part of Animal Services is to deal with bites. So any animal that bites a human being has to be quarantined for 10 days by state law. And essentially what that is for rabies control, to ensure that the person isn't going to contract rabies virus. Obviously when that does occur for a homeless individual, we're taking away their pet for that 10 days. It has to be maintained at the animal shelter. And it can be very burdensome cost-wise for them to have that animal stay with us at the animal shelter. The other issue that we run into when we deal with folks out in the community is the lack of a dog license. So in order to have a dog license, every dog within the city must be licensed. And in order to get that, you have to have a rabies vaccination for that animal. We have been lucky to work with a lot of rescue partners and a lot of other groups within the community to help provide low-cost vaccinations. We also have resources that we provide for low-cost spay and neuter for those folks that get their animals spayed and neutered so that they don't have unintended litters of kittens and puppies. That's one of the biggest things that we fight as being part of the animal welfare world, is to get folks to understand that, hey, you need to get your pets spayed or neutered so that we don't end up with 15 extra animals as opposed to just the one. So we provide those resources, places where we can go to get low-cost spay and neuter. We actually, twice a month, ARF comes to the animal shelter and has a low-cost spay and neuter van that actually does the neuter right in front of the animal shelter. So those are the types of things that we try to provide to folks. And that's open to anyone that's a resident of Antioch, not just the homeless as well. So that's kind of in a gist. Animal Control, Animal Services is brought in as help to aid the camps with regards to the animals that are specifically in those camps.
Thank you. So we'll just, Joy,
You want me to start?
yes, but let me grab control the mic.
So first of all, I just want to thank you, Forrest, for noting that, the city of Antioch is not a social services provider. I don't think a lot of people realize that. And that's a function of the county. We talked about that a little bit this morning, but I think it bears to be repeated quite often because it's a misunderstanding in the community. But Chief, I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more about the SET team. What's their process when they come upon a homeless person, you know, how does this work as far as referral process? Who do you turn to first as far as trying to direct them to services that they need?
Well, I'll say that question depends on the circumstances. And so our set team oftentimes runs across the same individuals multiple times. And so not every contact, and it depends on why our officers are contacting them in the first place. Sometimes it's a social contact, where they're just in the area and they see someone and they want to approach them and find out either if they don't know them, learn something about them and find out if there are services that can be offered. And we work with the core team, we work with other county resources, we work with code enforcement. So depending upon, we also work, have a close working relationship with Health Right 360, who you heard from earlier today, in large part because of the Lead Plus grant that I already spoke of. So depending upon what resources are needed, you know, they'll also reach out to 211 if someone needs those types of resources that are available through that avenue as well. So sometimes they come across people who they've had multiple contacts with, and they're going to try and just reaffirm, is there something that we could do to help you? That again is if it's a social contact. If they're contacting them because of a complaint, if they're contacting them because they're engaged in some sort of criminal activity, then that will depending on what the nature of the complaint is and what the criminal conduct is, and then they'll take appropriate action from there.
Okay, so I guess my question is on the fiscal side. Sometimes folks misunderstand what we're doing and then the investments that we're making in it. And so I constantly hear folks say, you're not doing anything. And to Joy's point, we're not a social services agency. But from a fiscal standpoint, Forrest and Chief talked a little about stats and how many calls for service that are specific to homeless overall. I'm curious to know if those are the community engagement team, or is that an officer and there's a category within our system that says this was a call related to homelessness. And I think the same thing for code enforcement. I'm curious to know if we track that and kind of understanding the budgetary investments in the growing crisis around homelessness. So the SET team is a deliberate investment in the homeless crisis. And so if there are any other examples of that, I'd like to hear about.
Well, I'll start by saying that the SET team is not solely responsible just for homeless issues. So they deal primarily with homeless issues, but they also deal with other quality of life crimes as well. The stats that I gave are overall for the police department. Keep in mind we have a 2-person SET team, and they each work 40 hours a week. So calls for service regarding homelessness are not relegated to just those 40 hours that these 2 officers work. So all of our officers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can be called to a homeless issue. And so the stats that I provided are for an entire calendar year involving all of our officers who respond to such calls.
And in community development, the costs of responding to encampments, we haven't really sat down and taken time to give an exact figure, but I would guess, we've come up with some back of the napkin estimates, probably between $300,000 and $500,000 a year. I say that because we have 2 teams, 2 full-time employees with a truck and a trailer, and the majority, at least 50% of their work is in response to homeless encampments. We've also had cases where we have like on 6th Street, not being private property, but we had a distant landlord, and there was an enormous encampment that was actually in a sensitive biological area. It's kind of a marsh. The owner was non-responsive, and so at some point the city just had to, go in and actually hire additional staff, contractors to come in just to remove all of the debris. That job alone was at $40,000. About $40,000 was spent on that one site, just removing, all the, I can say garbage, but it's, there's human waste involved, there's dead animals, there's all sorts of things that come out of it. It's not just a matter of household garbage. So there's a lot of expense that comes along with kind of following up and cleaning up afterwards.
If I could just add also, aside from the financial costs associated with these calls for service, it's also important to remember that, I gave stats that said over 2,900 calls last year. We've already been to almost 1,300 calls this year. If our officers are out there dealing with one of these issues, that means that they're not out there providing public safety services to some other place in our community. So they're not providing extra patrol, they're not providing traffic enforcement. And so there are other issues that when we are dealing with these particular issues, aside from the costs associated with officer salaries and the time spent dealing with these particular issues, the intangible is the fact that these officers are not out there doing something else that will contribute to making our community safer.
We have quite a few staff that do work in the creeks. We do extra work that we normally might not do, like trimming shrubs and brush and clearing, and using more large equipment, backhoes, dump trucks, and so forth to remove debris. So we spend quite a bit of money and staff effort to keep the creeks clean. And most, like Forrest alluded to, those are the prime spots where we have homeless. And we do have quite half a dozen staff that participate in these cleanups. And then, as I said before, it can be sometimes a dangerous situation with needles and working through the creeks to clean it. So it is a concern. We would like to. It would be great if we could minimize and keep those areas clean, but in reality, we spend quite a bit of time in the creeks.
I would say the biggest impact for our animal services is that we tend to work down at the individual animal level. So it is a time issue, with officers spending time trying to help with that one specific animal, they are lost to do those other things that we do.
Questions from the public? Oh, here we go.
Microphone?
Yes, I need
Okay. So, my name is Lisa Gregory. I'm here on two fronts. One, I'm an Antioch resident. I was born here in 1970. I also work for Health by 360 as a diversion navigator for the Coca Leaf Plus program. It's important to me for this community. I'm also the face of homelessness. Me and my daughters were homeless on the streets of Antioch. I spend hours of my work week working with people who have suffered incredible trauma. These are citizens of our community, and we keep throwing around homeless as if they are a group that we have to be afraid of. And some fear-mongering, rabies, violent crime, needles. I go out in all those encampments. I work on the streets. This is who you will see out there. Part of my problem is I'd like to see better collaboration between you county entities or city entities and us out here on the street doing this lake work. I'm part of law enforcement assisted diversion, and I don't hardly ever see the cops. I spend hours working with a client to walk them through social services, trying to get GA, Social Security, hours, because they can't be in those environments on their own. But what happens when they have their follow-up appointment is they've been moved around town. And so this question is for you, Chief Brooks. We're trying to work together here and make things better in our community, but we're struggling to try and meet that because people are moved. I have a client who's been moved 8 times in the last 2 weeks. I can't get her through anything to get services to get her off the streets. So I'd like to know, my question is this, how can we better collaborate so that we can meet those needs and get these people off the streets and in housing and to the services that they need? Thank you.
And I heard other people or not other departments that are also involved in the homeless kids. So if you want to address this question too.
I'll have to get back to what you were saying. I didn't quite understand it. But I will say, part of the issue is that's not a police function that you're talking about. So we are a law enforcement agency, and if we're dealing with someone who is homeless or otherwise, it's typically because they are engaged in criminal activity or they were a victim of criminal activity. We don't have, at the police department, additional resources that we could put towards those other services, which is why we have other organizations, which is why there are other county organizations, faith-based organizations, private-based organizations, community-based organizations who do provide those services. If law enforcement is involved, it's typically because a law has been broken. That's when we should be involved. So we don't have additional resources to provide after the fact, and for the most part, we would like to not be involved at all. If there are people who can provide services, whether it's housing, whether it's employment, whether it's mental health, whether it's drug addiction, all of those things do not fall under the purview of the police department. So we don't have the people who are trained or who are staffed to deal with those issues. So that's why you don't see a lot of participation from the Antioch Police Department, because that's not our area of expertise. We go out there and we have to deal with a long-term problem, but the only tools we have are short-term solutions, and we don't want to criminalize the behavior. But we are also not in the job market of finding homes and providing counseling services and mental health services. So that's why it's so important that other organizations step up and do their part so that police officers could go out there and provide public safety services.
And I hear you, and I, of course, agree, because our job is, Joy and I, the other 3 members of the city council, are trusted with public safety. And that can take various forms. But I think what I heard you say, which may not have, I think your question, I think, was addressed to I think, the wrong person. I could be wrong, but I think she's saying, I have clients out on the streets who live in encampments. I go look for them and they're gone. I can't help them. But I'm thinking that maybe Forrest, you can shed some light.
Was I somewhere along?
So, historically, I'd say until the last 10 years, homelessness was considered an urban issue, kind of the classic Tenderloin, Skid Row model. That's how government saw it, and that's where resources went. The Salvation Armies downtown, big cities. Homelessness doesn't look like that anymore. I think you can speak to that. Homelessness, this is a suburban community with a significant homeless issue. The resources for homelessness are headquartered in Martinez. The county administers all that. I mentioned state funds earlier. Those are going to go from the state to the county. We're going to have to fight like heck to get them out to East County. Because the first instinct is to go urban with the solution, or to do what we've always done. We don't have a homeless shelter in Antioch. Second largest city in the county, we don't have one. We need one. We need a place to take folks, because unfortunately, homeless encampments are not an acceptable solution to house people for a variety of reasons. We can do better. We need to do better. We can't be content to say, well, people just live down there, let's let them be.
So when code enforcement shows up along with the abatement team,
Yes.
public works, outside of our own agencies, does your department then communicate with Health Right 360, with the core team, and say, hey, we're getting ready to do this? Here's how we do that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
We don't currently, so we'll post the site and say, you know, again, we're not here to remove people. If people are there, we say we'll be back in 3 days. If people are there in 3 days, we don't arrest people, we don't kick them off site. We're there literally to clean up the mess. And I wish it weren't that, but that's enough in itself. Cleaning up the mess is a significant undertaking. You're familiar with homeless encampments. There's a lot of things happening there, you know. And I also want to be very clear that we are aware that the homeless population is not one population. There's everything from mothers with children living in their cars to single, you know, adult men living in encampments. There's drug use in some areas of homelessness. Other areas there's not drug use. There's alcohol abuse. There's all sorts of. It's a dynamic community. There's not one. You can't generalize homelessness. Not every homeless person is on drugs living in the camp. But that particular, that culture is a very difficult and destructive one, frankly, to a lot of to our property. So I don't have a solution. I know we keep working on it. I think a shelter at some point is probably the right solution. But we can connect and call you. That's a good short-term solution.
I think that's all you.
And I will also say that we, at the police department, as well as code enforcement, do work with these other organizations. It is not uncommon for us to go out when we do abatements and have resources on hand with us to provide them immediately on site. And some people take advantage of those resources and some do not. And that is similar to what we see, and I know that you work with Lead Plus. One of the drawbacks to Lead Plus is that it's a voluntary program. And so when we bring resources out to people, when we offer them resources that are available, that there is money set aside and people willing to help, they have to take it on a voluntary basis. We cannot force them to do it. And sometimes we find people who are not willing to accept that help. Not everyone, I'm just saying that but we do, us along with code enforcement, regularly bring these resources out there with us so that they are readily available when we're interacting with people.
Thank you. A question from, and I, you know what, I personally am trying to do a better job of just saying unhoused residents. Because these are our residents.
Words are important.
They are important, so I appreciate you for pointing that out.
Okay, so I do have a question, but I also want to...
You got 5 minutes speech too.
But I also want to identify myself as a co-chair and commissioner for District 5, this district, on the Contra County Mental Health Commission. I have worked hard, I mean hard, this past year, even going in there with 2 knee replacements, fresh out surgeries, to fight for Antioch to get money. We have the greatest in Contra Costa County. Antioch has the highest number of unhoused residents and homeless travelers. We call them travelers. I'm also a mental health clinician. Been doing this work for 30 years in education and in mental health. She said she was born at 7, that's my oldest daughter. So my children have seen me do this work. The problem is that we don't. My question is this: why has none of the people come to the commission meetings that are posted? Why haven't you come there? There's money to be had. I've reached out, including to Health Right in several places, to say, please come to the meetings. Come on. Nobody ever shows up. So I will make sure you get invitations for this next one, but I just wonder why nobody ever comes to the county meetings and say, look, we need help.
Our role will continue to be that of advocating for the resources and the agencies who deliver those resources to have a stronger presence in East County. I know for my department, we're not interested in taking on a social services role. And even if there's money to do that, we're not equipped to do that. I don't have the staff who's trained to provide mental health services or to be social workers. We want to see the county use their resources to directly deliver to East County. So if it means advocating for that, I think that's something we can do.
Forrest, correct me if I'm wrong. What committee did you say you were on?
On the Contra Costa County Mental Health Commission.
Oh, the mental health. I thought it was the homeless. Council of Homeless.
No.
So.
And we provide service money. There's money sitting there for.
I got you. I just wanted to point out that we do sit on the Council of Homelessness through our CDBG consultant, Terry House. And so you got it.
I do.
I wonder if each of you might comment on what pros and cons would be for your particular departments if there should be, say, more or less semi-permanent homeless encampments of some sort in the city.
I'm not going to quote Yoda, but there's no such thing as semi-permanent in the eyes of all the agencies that we work with, the state and federal. We have housing codes that say you have to have running water and sanitary sewer and all of these things. Whether it's temporary or permanent, they have to be in place. So in order to get to a point where you can meet basic housing codes and acknowledge that someone's living there for more than 72 hours, you have to go all the way with it. Even people ask, what about RVs? The state regulates RV parks. For those RV parks, you need a sewer system, you need sewer connections, you need running water, electricity. So you end up, to get to that semi-permanent temporary thing, you end up getting to basically a permanent facility. What's out there right now violates so many state and federal laws that I just didn't see a way of accommodating it. It's unfortunate, or maybe it's forced, I don't know. Environmental protection laws, water quality laws. I just don't see anything short of a permanent facility being something that we could do under the current regulations.
Forrest, can I follow up to that? Because I know this being a crisis just up and down, the West Coast, the nation actually.
We can't hear you, Joy.
A lot of the options.
Just doing research and looking at what other communities and cities are doing, a lot of them have turned to transitional places for temporary housing of some sort, RV parking, a safe place for people that are living in cars. A lot of communities have done this, so how are they doing that if this doesn't meet state regulations?
Sometimes the ends justifies the means for a lot of cities, and they just see it as we have a greater calling. I know cities who have used motels, where again nonprofits will contract with the hotel, give a motel in an area that's not as desirable as before, so that it's not necessarily viable as a motel and can be used as transitional housing. They'll block out rooms, so use those as a headquarters. That's an option. RVs and trailers in the state of California are intended to be used like on camping trips. And I say that because if you look at the housing laws, they don't meet that. The only time you can live in an RV is in a state licensed RV park, which has to be built, like I said, with permanent sewer and all that. So people who live on the streets in an RV, it's kind of this gray area. But in terms of us setting up something and saying, put your RVs there, where does the sewage go? Where does the water come from? Those are real issues that need to be addressed. And could we build something? Potentially, but again, we're going to look to maybe some of the state money. I don't have a great answer, I'm sorry.
So what about the model of the Central Valley where they set up tent shelters and provided sewage facilities, where restrooms, portable restrooms, dumpsters, and things of that nature? Now, would you be willing to consider something like that?
So before he answers that question, the city council sets the direction that the department heads follow. And so it's an appropriate question, so they'll give you this professional response. At the end of the day, the city council sets the policy. So I just, when he answers, I don't want anyone to be upset or happy or whatever it may be. He's answering based on his professional role, not as a policymaker.
Yes, so you're referring to the city of Modesto and Stanislaus County. Yeah, they ended up clearing out an encampment and turning it over to more organized tents. I think it's on Caltrans property. That's a great solution. It's an interesting solution. It just requires funding, it requires management. Oakland has done stuff with sheds. Antioch is not Stanislaus County or City of Modesto from a budgetary standpoint. The social services organizations that lead in Stanislaus County spearheaded that. So Contra Costa County generated something, there's a partnership and some type of arrangement to make that way the fairgrounds here. But yeah, there's relatively simple solutions, but again, I look to our policymakers if that was ever presented to us.
So what about from a code standpoint? Like that would still be within the fifth code, still like, or?
I'd have to look at how they address that because I'm not aware of an exception to that. There may be some provision I'm not aware of.
So back to the original question about centralized areas where that are either the homeless gathered or provided for. Being in public works, providing services to clean up, to provide temporary restrooms and so forth. It is much easier to try to manage and clean up, providing the dumpster in areas where I'm familiar with the homeless things, where folks provide these facilities in a passive nature. They're not approved by council or code. Staff bring out the restrooms. They bring out facilities to place garbage, and I think they're more of a passive don't ask, don't tell type of, I don't know how else to explain it. It's not ratified by city council resolution approved. It's providing service because a lot of these areas, they exist, and if you provide some of these facilities, the homeless will often take care of it and put the garbage for rangers to pick up and everything. And I'm speaking related to my experience in Sacramento, which I've spent 28 years providing homeless shelters and through Parks and Rec and working to do temporary warming stations during the winter months. And along Garden Highway, where I travel quite often, there are porta potties and county rangers that will pick up all the garbage. And it's a huge encampment, and it's passive, and it's not approved, and they're all over like that. So it's more of a passive nature. And Public Works is able, or folks that provide services are able to clean up those concentrated areas at a better cost, rather than going up and down the creeks and rivers, all up and down in different areas, providing certain facilities in those locations where they would gather that's most tolerable, and we can provide better service. So that's what's happening.
From a police department standpoint, it's a difficult question to answer because the answer is it depends on who lives there. I don't care what neighborhood you live in. You can have a very affluent neighborhood with neighbors who are running amok, causing problems, or you can have the poorest of neighborhoods where everyone follows the law and there are no problems. So as far as a pro and a con, it would really depend on the behavior. Again, this is what we in law enforcement have to deal with, is the behavior of people. It depends on the behavior of the people who live there.
Right, I think we're running out of time, so this may be the last question.
Two questions. I come from San Francisco, Texas. I was glad I'm out here, yeah. I work with Coco Lead, I'm a therapist on the committee and there. Two things that I see that are different. I appreciate the answer about public work and being able to at least passively find something short term to provide some kind of solution to a larger problem. Also, I hear that in different neighborhoods and different encampments, you can have different behaviors of people. We are out there trying to change behaviors. And if we, I think I know here is a smaller amount of budget, and so we got to utilize the budget short term and then think of long-term solutions, because there are permanent encampments, because all they do is just move. But I've been here for like 2 years now, and I've seen the same people for 2 years. That is permanent. And only a few of them are getting out. And even when we're trying to find them, housing is just hard for everybody. So what do we do long term? So my question is, how can we do better service? We understand that the law is not, is not a social service, but we are. And how do we work where you understand that if we move somebody and they flash and they go off, because mental issues, which I would say probably 7% that I've come in contact with there, do have some type of mental or addiction, a lot of mental. And so if we work together to find some short-term, one of the things I see is transportation, trying to get them to different places, the porta potties, showers, and then we out there teaching them how to continue to use them. They're benefits for them, right? That's short-term, but still trying to get them into housing and still trying to change behaviors at the same time. But what I've seen out here that's different in San Francisco is these different silos. And it's not a lot of public, city as much as, and this, I've never met anybody here yet. City saying there's a problem with doing something where you can and we're doing something outside, and they can be better served with the little budget that we do have if we started to do short-term measures.
And to that, I would say, Lead Plus exists alongside with the Antioch Police Department. We train with Lead Plus. We work cooperatively. I mean, Lead Plus, we have Lieutenant John Vanderput. Do you know who that is? Okay, so that's our liaison who works directly with you. Some of the things that you talk about, again, do not necessarily fall under the police side of it. So we are the ones who are providing the referral. We have the boots on the ground, the people out there interacting with these people and providing the referrals to you. So we're not working in silos, we're working with you, providing the clients, which we're asking you to help provide the services to. We're the ones out there when they don't follow through with the programs, because again, the Lead Plus program is voluntary. So when we run across someone who is arrested for a low-level offense, we give them the opportunity to take part in Lead Plus. And oftentimes they say no. Sometimes they say yes, and then they don't follow through with the program. And then sometimes they say yes, and they do. In the meantime, while all of that is going on, our officers are still the ones, because they are out there on the street, because we are receiving calls for service, directing our officers to them because of a behavior that has not quite been changed yet. We then refer them back to you. So I would disagree and say we're not working in silos. We all have a piece of the puzzle in which we're working, but we work very closely with Lead Plus, and we'll continue to do so throughout the grant program, because that's how it all works together and ties together.
We're out of time. We're out of time. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insight. It was certainly helpful and useful for myself and Joy as we work.
Well, I just want to thank the directors for coming out today, and I think to your point about silos, we just need to be better at it. And kind of the reason why we thought about forming this task force was really to try to find out where the gaps are and how we as a community and private organizations and nonprofits and the city and the county all start working, better together in trying to handle this crisis. We can't all individually do this. We're going to have to do it together. So this is part of this process, and I just want to thank you for being part of it today.
Thank you, and as a follow-up to this discussion here, Joy and I will be then reaching out and meeting with some of our boots on the ground, the community engagement team at the police department, our abatement team, our code enforcement, animal services. We do plan on doing some ride-alongs just to get a better feel for what's going on the ground. When I first got elected to city council, I did a ride-along with code enforcement, and every stop was a call about someone who was unhoused. I don't think we did anything else other than deal with going around, and specifically north of Highway 4, with people who are unhoused. And then I did right along with the police department. I would probably say maybe about 40% of our time on the ride along was going somewhere because someone called about someone hanging out here who wasn't doing something right, and they just so happened to have probably been unhoused. So we see it. We see the frustration. We've now heard to 3 panels, and I've already kind of seen some areas where there are silos, and then there's some areas where we're working great together. It's done by the police department, the fire department earlier, because they do some things in silos when we can better collaborate. So, but there's a lot of work to do around that, and so we see it, we hear it, we feel it every day because we're also residents, and so appreciate everyone's participation in this process. Thank you.
Lamar.
Denise Cantrell, the city photographer, is here. Oh, right.